Tonight for more on the process and what's next. Representative Destin Hall from Caldwell County and Representative Greer Martin from Wake County. Gentlemen, good to see you. Representative Hall, let's start with you. You've been chairing this committee. What a process. It's been interesting watching y'all kind of stand around these computers and go back and forth. What's it been like?
Well, thanks for having us, Tim. It's really been an unprecedented process here at the General Assembly, unlike anything that we've ever done before. We've had over 40 hours of live stream committee where members of the public can go online, they can watch the map making process, they can see their members trying to change the lines of those maps, and of course trying to do all of that within the court's criteria. It's been interesting. I've enjoyed getting to know some of my colleagues on the other side as we try to craft these maps in compliance with the court order.
Representative Martin, the reaction's been sort of mixed, particularly today I saw it on the Senate floor about what Democrats think about this. What are your thoughts?
Well, it has been a very open process, but let's be clear, it's only open because the court ordered it that way. And it does seem that it's probably not quite as open as the court intended to be. The base maps that have been used to draw both the House and the Senate maps were drawn by a professor behind closed doors for part of the litigation, and were not intended to be used actually as the basis for a map plan. So I think there's ways this could have been more open, particularly if we in the House had had an opportunity to hear from the public before we were called upon to cast a vote on these maps.
Representative Hall, do you think that this is a process that can be used or should be used moving forward?
Well, Tim, we'll see what the court says as to whether this process will be sanctioned moving forward. And I think it's also important to note as to the bipartisan nature of these maps. In the Senate, the vote was overwhelmingly bipartisan. Most Democrats in the Senate voted in favor. And even in the House Redistricting Committee, on 13 of 14 of these county groupings that we voted on, the vote was unanimous or almost unanimous on 13 out of 14. So the final result has been, in large part, a bipartisan result, and we're pleased with that.
Representative Martin, did you vote for the maps?
I did not, and the vast majority of House Democrats voted against their overall state map.
So do you want the court to strike these down, or was it a principal vote for Democrats in the House?
We voted against it because, first of all, we don't believe that the General Assembly followed the requirements of the court order for a fully open and transparent process. And we also are concerned that there is still the potential for some lingering partisan abuse in these maps. And we also, of course, still need to see what the racial impacts will be.
Representative Hall, what about that? You believe, obviously, that you met the court's requirements.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. The important thing for folks at home to understand is that we literally took some of the plaintiff's own maps that they used in this court case as our base map. And so that is the folks who said that the way that we had the maps drawn previously was improper. We took the maps that they literally used in that case, and that's where we started from. Again, we worked with both Democrats and Republicans in crafting these maps and making the changes that needed to be made to those base maps in order to comply with the court order. Republicans and Democrats coming together to work on these groupings, and we're pleased with that.
Representative Martin, Senator Blue on the other side basically said, yes, I would like redistricting reform, but he sort of has supported this process. Why do you think there's this discord between Democrats on what's transpired over the past week?
Well, I think Senator Blue would probably agree with me that the reason we have this process is because the court ordered it. The court didn't say this was the best process for drawing districts, just that it was less abusive than the process the General Assembly has used in the past. I certainly think there's a better way, and there is bipartisan agreement on this, at least in the House, that an independent, nonpartisan redistricting commission would be a much better way to draw districts than even the open process that we've done at this time. Hopefully the public has been watching and seen the potential for legislators to act in our own self-interest, regardless of whether Republican or Democrat. Someone other than us needs to be drawing these districts.
Why do you believe that this could be done partisan? Because partisan wasn't supposed to be part of this process.
Right. Well, the selection of the quote-unquote chin maps as the base maps is something that Democrats had no input in. And we haven't gotten adequate answers as to why those maps were chosen over some of the several other alternatives. There are other maps, for example, that the plaintiffs in the litigation used as part of their case, And why didn't we just start from scratch? It's something with our technology that we still could have gotten done even in the short time frame in which the court gave the General Assembly.
Representative Hall, what do you say to that?
Well, Tim, I would point out that in this court's over 300-page opinion, Dr. Chin's name was mentioned over 400 times. The court clearly put a great deal of the weight of its decision based upon what Dr. Chin testified at trial. And that's why ultimately we felt like that using Dr. Chin's own maps would be the best path forward. Now, both parties talked about which Chin maps to use, and ultimately we decided on a way to whittle down the very best Chin maps, that is, those that had the least partisan factors in them, and then at random chose those maps. And so, Tim, in my opinion, there's no evidence whatsoever at this point that any partisanship was used in these maps. We had Democrats and Republicans standing right beside each other on a live audio and video stream trying to make these changes. And so I'm satisfied that these maps are without partisanship and that the court will ultimately agree with us and institute these maps for the elections.
All right, I'll ask you both this question here before we leave, and I'll start with you, Representative Martin. Is it weird that we are not talking about this in a partisan manner, and here tonight we have these maps, so we're not certain what it's going to mean for control of the legislature?
There are certainly, it's not something we're talking about openly. I am concerned, again, behind the scenes that there's been some analysis of what the various maps that were in the plaintiff's lawsuit, which one might be more favorable to one particular party, and which one might be more favorable than just starting completely from scratch, again, which we could have done. And again, in the 350-page court opinion, there were multiple mentions of the Chin maps, and not a single one of those mentions said this is the ideal map, or Dr. Chin has drawn better maps, just that they were not as bad as the maps that the Republicans had drawn that were struck down by the bipartisan court.
Representative Hall, is it kind of weird that, I mean, you're playing such a strong role in this process, and you have no idea what it means for your party?
Yeah, that's right, Tim. We have no idea what the partisan makeup of these maps will ultimately be. That is the nature of choosing, again, the plaintiff's own maps in this instance and doing that at random. We only focused on the factors that the court told us to factor on, trying to keep municipalities whole, trying to keep precincts whole. We have no idea what the ultimate outcome will be. But I'll tell you, we're confident that whatever maps that we run under in 2020, we're excited about President Trump being on the ballot, and we think we're going to do well regardless.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. In the meantime, gentlemen, thank you. I know it's been a long week there for a multitude of reasons. Good to see you both.